In August 2013, on a highway in California, a 19-year-old college student stopped his car and refused to keep driving. Bryce Laspisa had been on a normal trip home, but something changed during the journey. He remained in the same roadside location for hours without explanation. When contacted, he told his parents he was fine and would continue driving soon, but he did not move. Roadside assistance was called after he ran out of fuel, yet even after help arrived, he stayed. A truck driver later reported seeing Bryce sitting in his car for an extended period, completely still. For nearly 14 hours he remained there, doing nothing, going nowhere. Then, in the early morning, his car was found crashed near Castaic Lake. The vehicle was overturned, heavily damaged, but Bryce was not inside. He was gone, and he has never been found. Bryce Laspisa was a 19-year-old college student living in California. He was enrolled at Sierra College and studying computer and video game design. Friends and family described him as intelligent, creative, and generally responsible. He maintained regular contact with his parents and had no known history of disappearing. In the days leading up to his disappearance, Bryce had been spending time with friends near campus. Nothing initially appeared unusual about his routine, but subtle changes began to emerge in his behavior. He reportedly gave away some of his personal belongings to friends without clear explanation. He also ended a relationship with his girlfriend shortly before leaving campus. These actions were unexpected and not fully understood at the time. On August 28, 2013, Bryce began the drive from Northern California toward his parents' home in Southern California. The journey was expected to take several hours. His parents were aware that he was coming home and were in contact with him during the trip. At first, everything appeared normal. Bryce confirmed he was on his way and said he would arrive later that day. However, as the hours passed, his progress did not match the expected timeline. He remained on the road far longer than anticipated. Despite this, he continued to reassure his parents that he was fine. There was no clear indication yet that anything was seriously wrong, but the timeline of his journey was already beginning to drift, and the distance he should have covered did not match where he actually was. As Bryce continued his journey, his parents began noticing unusual delays. He had not made the expected progress along the route. When they called him, he answered calmly and said he was still driving, but his location did not match the distance he should have covered. Hours passed, yet Bryce remained within the same general area. At one point, he admitted he had stopped to rest. He said he was tired, but assured them he would resume driving shortly. Concerned, his parents continued checking in with him by phone. Each time, Bryce sounded composed and in control. He repeated that he was fine and did not need help. Despite this, his position on the highway barely changed. His parents began to question why he was not moving. Eventually, they contacted roadside assistance to check on him. A service worker was dispatched to Bryce's location. When the worker arrived, Bryce was found sitting in his car. He appeared physically unharmed and showed no signs of distress. Bryce declined any further assistance and said he would continue driving. The service worker left, believing the situation was resolved. But after the worker departed, Bryce did not leave the area. He remained there for hours longer, stationary on the roadside. His parents continued to call, growing increasingly concerned. Yet Bryce continued to insist that everything was fine. After remaining stationary for hours, Bryce finally resumed driving. It was now late at night, and the conditions on the road had changed. traffic had reduced and visibility was limited. Bryce was now heading toward the area near Castaic Lake. His parents remained in contact with him during this time. He told them he was continuing the journey and would arrive soon, but his movement still did not follow a normal pattern. There were gaps in time where his exact location was unclear. At approximately 2 a.m., Bryce's car left the roadway. The vehicle went down an embankment near the lake. The impact caused significant damage to the car. The vehicle overturned and came to rest on its side. At that moment, there were no witnesses present at the scene. The crash was not immediately reported. There was no clear indication of what caused him to lose control. His last known communication did not suggest panic or urgency. The crash site remained undiscovered for several hours. The surrounding area was dark and isolated. There were no immediate signs of another vehicle being involved. No one saw Bryce exit a vehicle, and no one saw where he went after the crash. Later that morning, his parents had still not heard from him. His expected arrival time had passed without any confirmation. Calls to his phone began going unanswered. Concern quickly escalated into alarm. They contacted authorities to report him missing. Search efforts were initiated along his known route. Eventually, Bryce's car was located near Castaic Lake. It had gone down an embankment and was heavily damaged. The vehicle was overturned, with clear signs of a high-impact crash. But when authorities examined the scene, Bryce was not inside. There were no immediate signs indicating where he had gone. His personal belongings were still inside the vehicle. His phone and wallet were found at the scene. This suggested he had not left with essential items. Investigators began examining the area surrounding the crash site. Search teams looked for footprints or signs of movement, but the terrain made tracking difficult. No clear trail could be established. There were no confirmed sightings of Bryce after the crash. The timeline from the crash to the discovery remained uncertain, and the location where he might have gone was unknown. Following the discovery of the crash site, a full investigation was launched. Authorities began reconstructing Bryce's movements in the hours leading up to the crash. Phone records were reviewed to establish a timeline. These records confirmed multiple calls between Bryce and his parents. During those conversations, Bryce consistently stated that he was fine. There were no clear indications of distress in his voice. Investigators also examined reports from the roadside assistance interaction. The service worker confirmed that Bryce appeared calm and cooperative. He did not request help beyond the fuel service. This detail raised further questions about his extended stop. Toxicology reports were considered as part of the investigation. There was no confirmed evidence suggesting impairment at the time of the crash. Attention then shifted to the physical evidence at the scene. The vehicle damage suggested a high-speed impact. However, there were no skid marks indicating sudden braking. This raised the possibility that the crash was not an attempt to avoid an obstacle. Search teams expanded their efforts into the surrounding terrain. Helicopters and ground units scanned the nearby areas. Despite extensive coverage, no confirmed trace of Bryce was found. No footprints, no clothing, and no clear direction of travel. The absence of physical evidence made the case increasingly difficult to interpret, and the gap between the crash and Bryce's disappearance remained unexplained.
As the investigation continued, multiple theories began to emerge. One possibility considered was that Bryce left the scene on foot. The surrounding terrain included steep slopes and dense vegetation. This made it difficult to determine a clear path of movement. Search teams focused on the area near Castaic Lake. They examined the shoreline and nearby trails. Another theory suggested the possibility of disorientation. Bryce's extended roadside stop raised questions about his mental state. However, there was no definitive evidence explaining his behavior. Some investigators considered whether he may have entered the water. Search efforts included scans of the lake. No confirmed evidence was found to support this theory. There was also speculation about the involvement of another person, but no witnesses reported seeing anyone else at the scene. No additional vehicles were linked to the crash. The absence of physical evidence limited the scope of conclusions. Bryce's belongings remaining in the car added further complexity. It suggested that his departure from the vehicle was unexpected. Despite ongoing efforts, no single theory fully explained the sequence of events. Each possibility raised new questions without providing clear answers, and the reason for Bryce's actions that night remained unknown. More than a decade later, Bryce Laspisa's disappearance remains unresolved. No confirmed sightings have been reported since the night of the crash. The area around Castaic Lake has been searched multiple times. Each search has failed to produce definitive answers. Investigators continue to revisit the case periodically, but the absence of physical evidence limits new developments. Bryce's behavior in the hours before the crash remains a central question. Why he stayed stationary for so long is still unclear. His calm communication with his parents adds further complexity. There were no clear signs that he intended to disappear. The condition of the crash suggests a sudden and unexplained event. Yet there is no clear explanation for what happened afterward. His belongings left behind indicate he did not plan a departure. This detail continues to challenge many of the proposed theories. The case highlights how a timeline can be documented but still incomplete. Even with phone records and witness accounts, key moments remain missing. Bryce Laspisa left behind a sequence of events without a clear conclusion. A journey that began as a routine drive became something else entirely. The gap between what is known and what happened continues to remain, and the final moments of that night have never been fully understood. His disappearance remains one of the most puzzling cases in recent history.